the heart of Africa stood Juaku, a city where the sun seemed to shine brighter, casting long shadows that divided the rich from the poor. Towering skyscrapers reached for the sky, glimmering in the sunlight, symbols of power and prestige. This was Nguzo Peaks, where the wealthy lived in luxury, high above the noise and chaos of the streets below. The roads were lined with sleek cars, designer boutiques, and rooftop lounges that seemed to float in the clouds. Life was easy here, wrapped in silk suits and champagne glasses, where the city's elite looked down, quite literally, on the world beneath them. But just beyond the glittering skyline, at the edge of the city, lay a very different world. Mtaa Mwisho, known to locals as the last street. It was a place where the streets were alive, not with wealth, but with resilience. Here, markets burst with colour and sound. Vendors shouted over each other to sell ripe mangoes, handmade crafts, and sizzling street food. Children weaved through the crowds, laughing as they played with makeshift toys. Music poured from every corner, blending Afrobeat rhythms with the sound of life itself. The people of Mtaa Mwisho didn't have much, but they had spirit, and they held onto their dreams tighter than the rich held onto their diamonds. Juaku was a city of contrasts, two worlds existing side by side but never touching. Nguzo Peaks glittered above, while Mtaa Mwisho pulsed with the heartbeat of the streets below. The rich believed they were untouchable, while the poor believed they were forgotten. But in this city, where the sun touched both worlds equally, one truth remained. Life has a way of bringing the high and mighty crashing down, while lifting the overlooked to unimaginable heights. Kumo was the kind of guy everyone admired. Born into the powerful Lekau family, his life was a picture of luxury. He woke up every morning in his massive glass-walled bedroom high up in Nguzo Peaks, where the city stretched out below him like it belonged to him. His bed felt like a cloud, his closet overflowed with designer clothes, and a sleek sports car waited for him in the driveway. Breakfast wasn't just food, it was a full spread prepared by the family's chef. His father, a ruthless business tycoon, ruled Juaku's industries with an iron fist. People didn't just respect the Lekau name, they feared it. Kumo never had to work for anything. Private schools, weekend getaways to other countries, and invitations to the most exclusive parties were his everyday reality. He had charm, good looks, and a last name that opened every door for him. Life was easy when the world treated you like a prince. But far below Nguzo Peaks, in the heart of Mtaa Mwisho, Aisha woke up to a very different life. Her room was small, barely enough space for her, her sewing machine, and a pile of colourful fabrics stacked neatly in the corner. The walls were cracked, and the smell of her mother's frying chapati filled the air, not from a chef, but from the small stove they shared with their neighbours. Aisha didn't have time to dream about luxury. She was too busy keeping her family afloat. Her father was gone, leaving her mother to raise her and her younger brother Kato alone. Aisha wasn't just talented, she was brilliant. Without any formal training, she taught herself to design and sew clothes. Her hands moved like magic, turning old fabrics into stunning, vibrant pieces that reflected the spirit of Mtaa Mwisho. Bold patterns, bright colours, and a style that screamed strength and resilience. Every day, she carried her creations to the busy market, setting up her little corner stall. She bartered with customers, smiled through the exhaustion, and ignored the ache in her back from working late into the night. While Kumo's friends discussed their next trip to Dubai, Aisha calculated how many dresses she needed to sell to buy school supplies for Kato. Kumo lounged by infinity pools, sipping expensive drinks, while Aisha haggled over a few extra shillings to afford rice for dinner. He never noticed the street vendors or the market girls when his car sped past Mtaa Mwisho, and she never looked up at the glittering towers of Nguzo Peaks, because those worlds didn't belong to people like her. Yet despite the harshness of her life, Aisha never felt small. She wore her handmade clothes proudly, her head held high, knowing she was creating something beautiful in a world that tried to keep her invisible. Kumo, on the other hand, had everything. Yet deep down, he felt nothing. The luxury, the parties, the admiration, none of it made him feel alive. Two lives, two completely different realities, both walking the same streets of Juaku, unaware that fate was about to intertwine their worlds in a way neither of them could have ever imagined. The sun was blazing over Juaku when Kumo's sleek black sports car came to a sputtering stop right at the edge of Mwisho. He slammed the steering wheel in frustration. His phone had no signal, and there wasn't a driver or mechanic in sight. The streets were loud and crowded, filled with market stalls and the smell of sizzling meat. Vendors shouted over one another, selling everything from ripe fruit to handmade jewelry. It was a place Kumo never had a reason to stop. Until now. From her corner stall, Aisha watched the scene unfold. It wasn't every day a luxury car broke down in Mwisho, let alone one driven by someone who clearly didn't belong there. Kumo looked hopeless, completely out of his element, and for some reason, she found it amusing. After a moment, she walked over. "Looks like your fancy car couldn't handle our streets," she teased, a smirk tugging at her lips. Kumo turned, startled. He expected pity, or maybe even people trying to take advantage of him, but not this. Aisha stood confident, her bright handmade dress standing out like a flame among the crowd. He was caught off guard, not just by her words, but by her energy. She wasn't intimidated by him. She wasn't impressed by his car or his clothes. She looked at him like he was just a guy with a broken car. "I think it's the engine," Kumo muttered, embarrassed. "Or maybe it's the driver," Aisha shot back playfully. She didn't wait for him to respond. "Come on, I know a guy. He can fix anything." Kumo hesitated. He wasn't used to trusting strangers, especially in places like this, but something about Aisha made him follow. She led him through the winding streets, past stalls, overflowing with colourful fabrics and sizzling grills. He noticed how people greeted her with warmth and smiles. She wasn't just part of Mwisho. She was loved here. They reached a small garage, tucked behind a row of shops. Aisha called out, and a young man, her brother, Kato, appeared from under a car, his hands covered in grease. After a quick inspection, Kato nodded confidently. "I can fix it, but it'll take a while." Kumo sighed, leaning against the wall. Aisha watched him for a moment, then sat down nearby. "So, what brings a Nguzo Peaks prince to Mwisho?" she asked, her voice light but curious. Kumo chuckled dryly. "Bad luck, I guess. Looks like good luck to me," she replied with a grin. For the first time in a long while, Kumo felt himself relaxed. They talked. At first, it was small things, the city, the weather. But then, the conversation shifted. Aisha told him about her designs, how she dreamed of opening her own fashion house one day, even though the world seemed determined to keep girls like her in the market stalls. Kumo listened, fascinated. He wasn't used to people talking about dreams like that, not dreams built from nothing but passion and grit. Most people in his world already had everything handed to them. Aisha's fire was different. It wasn't about money or status. It was about proving that she mattered, that her work mattered. Aisha, meanwhile, found herself surprised by Kumo. He wasn't like the other rich boys she imagined, arrogant and dismissive. He was funny, a little awkward, and surprisingly thoughtful. He didn't talk about himself much. Instead, he kept asking her questions, genuinely interested in what she had to say. By the time Kato finished fixing the car, the sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the city. Kumo didn't want to leave. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't pretending to be someone he wasn't. And as Aisha watched him drive away, she couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't like the others after all. The invitation came like a dream. Kumo asked Aisha to be his guest at one of the most exclusive galas in Juaku, an event where the city's elite gathered in shimmering gowns and tailored suits. It felt unreal, like a piece of his world was reaching into hers. Aisha was hesitant. She didn't belong in Nguzo Peaks, and she knew it. But when she looked into Kumo's eyes and saw the sincerity there, she pushed her fears aside. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to prove she could stand among them, not as a market girl, but as Aisha Bahati, the designer who would one day change the fashion world. She spent days working on her dress, pouring her heart into every stitch. The fabric was a blend of vibrant African prints, bold colors, and street-style cuts that told the story of Mtaa Mwisho. It wasn't just a dress, it was a statement. It carried the spirit of her home and the strength of her people. When she finally looked at herself in the mirror, she didn't see a market girl anymore. She saw a queen. The night of the gala, Nguzo Peaks looked like a glittering fantasy. Chandeliers sparkled, music floated through the air, and the city's most powerful people laughed over champagne. Kumo met Aisha at the entrance, his eyes widening when he saw her. She looked breathtaking, different from anyone there, bold and unapologetic. He smiled, proud to have her by his side. For a moment, everything felt perfect, but the illusion shattered the second they stepped inside. Heads turned, whispers began, and the room filled with judgment. Kumo's friends, the sons and daughters of CEOs and politicians, stared at Aisha like she was an intruder. "Who let the market girl in?" One girl sneered, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Laughter followed, cold and cruel. Aisha felt the room close in on her, but she held her head high. She wasn't ashamed of who she was. But Kumo froze, his face flushed with embarrassment. He saw the looks his friends gave him, waiting, judging. He felt the pressure building in his chest, the unspoken demand to pick a side. And in that moment, he made the wrong choice. "She's just a market girl, not one of us," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the room. Aisha's heart stopped. The words hit harder than any slap ever could. She stared at him, searching his face for something, an apology, a sign that he didn't mean it. But all she saw was the boy she thought was different, blending into the crowd that mocked her. She didn't say a word. She didn't cry. She just turned around and walked out, leaving the glittering world of Nguzo Peaks behind her. Kumo watched her go, his stomach twisting with regret, but it was too late. The girl who brought color and fire into his life was gone, swallowed by the night. Aisha didn't stop walking until she was far from Juaku. She left everything behind, her stall, her sewing machine, even her brother. She disappeared without a trace, determined to never feel that kind of humiliation again. Kumo returned to the party, surrounded by laughter and champagne, but nothing felt the same. The music sounded hollow, the lights too bright. He had everything, yet he felt like he had lost the only thing that ever made him feel alive. Years passed, and Juaku became louder than ever, not with the usual noise of street markets and city traffic, but with the name on everyone's lips. Aisha Bahati, the girl who once sold handmade clothes in the dusty corners of Mtaa Mwisho, was now an unstoppable force in the fashion world. Billboards across the city showed models draped in bold, breathtaking designs, each piece a celebration of the street style that once defined her. Her brand, Mtaa Royale, was more than just fashion. It was a movement. Mtaa Mwisho's vibrant spirit, the colors, the energy, the resilience. Aisha had bottled it all and transformed it into wearable art. Rich, patterned fabrics, sharp street-style cuts, and the unapologetic boldness of the market stall now walked red carpets and royal palaces alike. Celebrities, world leaders, and socialites proudly wore her design, each one telling a story of survival, strength, and culture. People loved her, not just for her talent, but for her story. She wasn't a privileged designer born into wealth. She was the girl who started with nothing, humiliated by the elite, and came back stronger than anyone could have imagined. Fashion shows, from Paris to New York to Cape Town, opened with African drums and ended with standing ovations. Models strutted down runways in clothes, inspired by the very streets people once mocked her for coming from. In every interview, Aisha spoke about Mtaa Mwisho, not as a place to escape from, but as a home to honor. She didn't hide her past. She wore it like a crown, and the world loved her for it. Juaku's socialite, the same ones who laughed at her years ago, now begged to wear her designs. The girls who called her a market girl posted pictures in her latest collections, acting as though they had supported her all along. The irony wasn't lost on Aisha, but she didn't waste time on bitterness. She had bigger dreams to chase. Nguzo Peaks, the shining heart of the city's elite, watched from afar. Kumo watched too. He saw her face on billboards, her name in headlines, her designs on runways. He saw the girl he once admired become a woman the world couldn't stop admiring. He never forgot the look on her face the night of the gala. The weight of his words haunted him more than he ever admitted. He realized too late that Aisha wasn't just a market girl. She was a queen in the making. And now, she ruled the world while he was still standing in the same place, surrounded by the same shallow people. Aisha didn't need his apology. She didn't need his approval. She built an empire from the very thing they mocked her for, her roots. And Juaku, once a city that ignored her, now stood still every time her name was spoken. Aisha Bahati wasn't just a success story. She was a revolution, and she wasn't done yet. Kumo's world fell apart faster than he ever thought possible. One day, he was the golden boy of Juaku, living in the endless luxury of Nguzo Peaks. And the next, his family's name was plastered across every news channel for all the wrong reasons. Lekau Industries, the empire his father built, came crashing down in a massive corruption scandal. His father was arrested, dragged out of their glass mansion in handcuffs, while reporters shouted questions and cameras flashed. The powerful Lekau name, once untouchable, was now a symbol of greed and betrayal. Their assets were seized. The cars, the mansions, the private accounts, all gone. One by one, Kumo watched his so-called friends disappear too. The people who once laughed at his jokes and invited him to exclusive parties stopped answering his calls. He wasn't Kumo Lekau, the rich heir anymore. He was just Kumo, the disgraced son of a criminal. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be powerless. He moved from a penthouse to a cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. The designer clothes were replaced with whatever he could afford. He couldn't walk through Nguzo Peaks without people whispering or staring. His name wasn't admired anymore. It was pitied. Days turned into weeks, and desperation took over. Kumo applied for job after job, but no one wanted to hire the son of a scandal. He wasn't qualified for anything real. His whole life had been built on his father's money and reputation. Without that, he had nothing. One day, he saw a flyer for Emtar Royal, the global fashion empire everyone was talking about. It wasn't just a brand anymore. It was a phenomenon. It was bold, powerful, and celebrated the streets of Juaku in a way no one ever had before. The flyer said they were hiring. Kumo didn't think twice. He didn't have time for pride. A job was a job. He wasn't looking to rebuild his old life. He just wanted to survive. He sent in an application, hoping someone, anyone, would give him a chance. Days later, he got an email. "You're invited for an interview." Kumo showed up in his best clothes, a wrinkled button-down and shoes that had seen better days. The Emtar Royal building was stunning, towering over the city with sleek glass windows and murals of models wearing powerful, colourful designs. He swallowed his nerves and walked inside, surrounded by people who looked busy, successful, and important. He was guided to a room, his heart pounding in his chest. The door opened and he froze. Sitting at the head of the table was Aisha Bahati. She looked different, stronger, more powerful, yet still carrying that same quiet fire in her eyes. She wasn't the market girl he once knew. She was the woman who built an empire from the very streets he once looked down on. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was thick with the weight of their past. Kumo's throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but no words came. Aisha didn't look surprised to see him. If anything, there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Not hate, not revenge, just calm, knowing strength. Kumo realized in that moment he wasn't just asking for a job. He was standing face to face with the girl he had betrayed. And now, she held his future in her hands. Kumo sat nervously in the sleek, modern office of Emtar Royal. He couldn't stop his leg from bouncing, his palms damp with sweat. The building itself felt intimidating. Bold African art covered the walls, and the air smelled expensive, like success and power. People in stylish clothes walked past him, looking busy and important. Their conversations filled with words like international expansion and celebrity endorsements. It was clear this wasn't just a fashion brand, It was an empire, and he was here, hoping to be a part of it, even if it was just a tiny, insignificant part. He kept reminding himself that a job was a job. He wasn't Kumo Lekau, the rich boy from Nguzo Peaks anymore. He was just a man trying to survive. The receptionist finally called his name, and he followed her down a long hallway. His heart pounded louder with each step. He was led into a large, glass-walled office. The view overlooked the entire city, the same city where his family name had once meant power. Now, it meant nothing. The door opened, and Kumo stood up quickly, but when he saw who walked in, his heart stopped. It was Aisha. She wasn't the girl he remembered from Mta Mwisho. She was different now, powerful, elegant, and untouchable. She wore a sleek, tailored suit in a bold African print, her hair styled perfectly. There was a quiet confidence in the way she walked, like she owned not just the room, but the entire building. And she did. Kumo felt like the air had been knocked out of his lungs. His mind raced, memories crashing down on him all at once. The market, the gala, the cruel words he couldn't take back. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to say something, but his throat felt dry and useless. Aisha, on the other hand, didn't flinch. She looked at him like he was a stranger, like he didn't matter. "Kumo," she said calmly, her voice smooth and steady. "You're here for the job interview." He could only nod, his voice trapped somewhere in his chest. She sat down across from him, flipping through a file without meeting his eyes. "Your resume is thin," she said bluntly. "No real work experience, no relevant skills, but you're willing to work hard, right?" Kumo swallowed hard. "Yes," he managed to choke out. "I am. I'll do anything." For a moment, Aisha looked at him, really looked at him. He couldn't read her expression. It wasn't anger or pity. It was something colder, more distant, like he was just another problem she needed to handle before moving on with her day. After a long pause, she spoke again. "There's an opening," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "It's not glamorous. It's in the warehouse. Packing orders, long hours, low pay." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "But it's a job." Kumo blinked, stunned. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe for her to throw him out, maybe to laugh in his face. But this, he wasn't sure if it was mercy or punishment. "Do you want it or not?" Aisha asked, her voice cool. Kumo nodded quickly. "Yes, I'll take it." Aisha closed the file and stood up, already moving on to whatever important thing came next in her busy day. She didn't give him another look as she spoke her final words. "Report to the warehouse manager tomorrow. Don't be late." And just like that, she walked out, leaving Kumo sitting there, stunned and speechless. He barely recognized the woman who had once laughed with him by a broken-down car in the streets of Mta Mwisho. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the fact that she didn't seem to hate him, or the fact that she didn't seem to care at all. The air smelled of fresh fabric and cardboard, the sounds of sewing machines and workers' chatter filling the massive space. He stood at the entrance for a moment, taking it all in. Just a few years ago, he wouldn't have even stepped foot in a place like this. Now, it was his reality. The warehouse manager, a broad-shouldered man named Django, handed Kumo a uniform, just a plain navy shirt with the Mta Royal logo on the chest. No special treatment, no shortcuts. "You're part of the team now," Django said gruffly. "Work hard, respect the job, and you'll be fine." Kumo nodded, rolling up his sleeves. He was ready to prove himself. At first, the work was exhausting. Packing orders, lifting heavy boxes, running from one end of the warehouse to the other. It was nothing like the life of luxury he once knew. His hands, once soft and unworked, ached by the end of the day. The workers around him, people he would have ignored in his old life, moved effortlessly, laughing and joking, even as they worked hard. Some of them recognized him, some whispered behind his back, others openly smirked, amused by the fall of Juaku's former prince. But no one gave him special treatment. No one cared about his last name here, and strangely, for the first time in his life, Kumo felt free. Aisha never spoke to him, but he knew she was watching. He felt her presence, saw glimpses of her walking through the offices above the warehouse, giving orders with the quiet confidence of a leader. He wondered what she thought when she looked down and saw him among the workers he once looked down on. At first, he thought this was her revenge, a way to make him feel small, to remind him of what he had lost. But as the weeks passed, he realized something else. Aisha wasn't waiting for him to suffer. She wasn't even thinking about him. She had moved on. That truth stung more than anything. Kumo worked harder. He started learning from the workers around him, listening to their stories, their struggles. He saw the pride they took in their work, in being part of something bigger. Slowly, his mindset shifted. He wasn't a Leikao anymore. He wasn't the rich boy who thought success was just something you were born into. He was just Kumo, and for the first time, he was okay with that. One day, as he stayed late to finish packing an order, Django walked over and clapped a hand on his shoulder. "You're not bad, kid. Didn't think you'd last a week." Kumo just smiled. He wasn't sure if he had expected to last either. Above them, in her office, Aisha stood by the window, watching. She saw the way he worked, the way he listened, the way he no longer carried the arrogance of the past. She had given him a job to see if he would break. Instead, he had started to rebuild himself. Maybe this wasn't about revenge anymore. Maybe this was something else entirely. One evening, as the warehouse emptied out and the sun dipped low over Juaku, Kumo stayed behind to finish sorting the last shipment. His muscles ached, but he didn't mind. There was a strange kind of peace in the work now, a satisfaction he never knew he could feel. The sound of heels clicking against the concrete floor broke the silence. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. He felt her presence before he saw her. Aisha. She stood there, tall and powerful, her eyes unreadable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the city outside filled the heavy silence between them. "You've lasted longer than I thought," she finally said, her voice cool and steady. Kumo turned to face her, his throat tightening. He didn't know what to say. Aisha took a step closer, her gaze never leaving his. "Tell me, Kumo, do you still think I'm beneath you?" Her words cut through him sharper than any insult ever could. His chest tightened, and for a second he couldn't breathe. He remembered the gala like it was yesterday, the way he caved to his friends, the way he let his cowardice humiliate the only person who ever truly saw him for more than his last name. His voice trembled when he spoke. "I was wrong." He swallowed hard, his eyes burning. "You were never beneath me, Aisha. You were always more than me, more than them, more than anyone I've ever known." The words spilled out like a confession he'd held onto for too long. His voice cracked, raw and unfiltered. He wasn't speaking as the boy from Nguzo Peaks anymore. He was speaking as the man he had become, the man she unknowingly helped shape. Tears pricked his eyes, but he didn't care. "I was a fool. I didn't see it then. I see it now." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Aisha, for everything." Aisha's expression didn't soften, but something flickered in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. Maybe it was closure. Maybe it was understanding. Or maybe it was something else entirely. For a moment, she studied him like she was trying to decide if his words were real. Then slowly, she nodded, just once. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her heels echoing in the quiet warehouse. Kumo didn't stop her. He didn't need to. For the first time in his life, he wasn't chasing after someone else's approval. He wasn't trying to fix the past. He had already found what he was looking for. Not forgiveness, but truth. The truth about who he was, and the truth about who Aisha had been all along. Days passed after their confrontation, but Kumo couldn't shake the weight of Aisha's words, or his own. He didn't expect forgiveness. He didn't feel like he deserved it. Yet, when Aisha finally approached him again, it wasn't with anger or bitterness. She stood in front of him, calm and steady as ever, and said, "I forgive you, Kumo." The words hit him harder than he expected. His throat tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. But before he could let that relief settle, she continued, "But forgiveness doesn't mean you get your old life back." Her voice was gentle, but firm. That life wasn't yours to begin with. It was built on someone else's power. It's time you build something of your own. Kumo nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. She wasn't punishing him. She was giving him a gift, the chance to create his own future, one not tied to his father's name or his past mistake. For the first time, he didn't want to go back to Nguzo Peaks. He didn't miss the designer suits, the fancy parties, or the fake friends. He missed purpose. He missed feeling like he mattered. Inspired by Aisha's journey and by the people he had worked alongside in the warehouse, Kumo found himself drawn to Mtaa Mwisho. The streets once looked like a world beneath it. Now they felt like home. He saw the raw talent and untapped potential in the young people selling art, music, and clothes in the market stalls. Just like Aisha once had, he started small, using the little savings he had managed to hold on to. He rented an old abandoned building on the edge of the market and turned it into a community space, a workshop where young designers, artists, and entrepreneurs could create, collaborate, and dream. He called it Mwisho Rising. He wasn't a business expert, but he didn't need to be. He listened to the people around him, learning from them as much as they learned from him. He helped them network with local vendors, taught them the basics of branding and marketing, things he once took for granted in his old life. Word spread fast. Street artists whose work used to fade on forgotten walls were now selling prints to tourists. Young tailors, inspired by Aisha's designs, started crafting their own clothing line. Musicians gathered at Mwisho Rising to record songs that blended the rhythm of the streets with the pulse of the city. And Aisha noticed. Mtaa Royal continued to grow, becoming more than just a fashion empire. It became a movement. Aisha expanded the company, opening a new branch in Mtaa Mwisho. Not a flashy corporate building, but a creative hub that gave jobs to local tailors, artisans, and designers. She hired from the streets that raised her, proving to the city that greatness wasn't born in the skyscrapers of Nguzo peaks. It was built from the ground up, in places people overlooked. Kumo often saw her from a distance, visiting the new hub. She didn't acknowledge him every time, but when their eyes met, there was something there, a quiet understanding. They were no longer the people they once were. They had both grown into something stronger. He didn't need her to save him anymore, and she didn't need to prove herself to him. Juaku began to change, little by little. The gap between Nguzo Peaks and Mtaa Mwisho didn't feel so wide anymore, and Kumo, once the boy who thought success was his birthright, finally felt like he belonged, not because of his family name, but because of what he built with his own hands. Aisha's legacy wasn't just Mtaa Royal. It was the belief that even the forgotten streets of Juaku held kings and queens. They just needed someone to remind them of it. Kumo was proud to be a part of that.